I would like to welcome everyone here once again and to wish every success to this conference. And also, I would like to give the floor to Vitaly, our next speaker, who will be speaking on behalf of the Ministry of Digital Transformation. Hello, I'm very glad to see familiar faces here in this room. I only have 3 slides, after which we will make the transition to the essence of our conversation. So let's start from the last one. So I love numbers, especially billions, because they always draw everyone's attention. So according to the statistics available in United States alone, the investments in artificial intelligence in the government sector only comprised $8 billion. I believe this is the best illustration to what is happening in the field. And this confirms that artificial intelligence right now is, as Alexander has mentioned, one of the tools of geopolitics. And China, as you can see, is competing with China in this field. So many people are writing on this subject, who is leading, for instance. So if you look here and see the level on which the artificial intelligence is represented in the US. So here is Joe Biden's assistant, who is responsible for artificial intelligence, and also there is the National AI Research Task Force, which developed different approaches to it. As for China, the second most successful country in this field. Again, here we have artificial intelligence represented at the level of the ministry and also at the level of the AI promotion office, again, on the national level. So in the US, $8 billion and also Biden's assistant responsible for the subject. These are the proofs that AI is becoming one of the factors that is changing the balance of powers in the world. And we, as an advisory body working for the Ministry of Digital Transformation, we started to draft the concept of digital development 2 years ago, and 1 year ago it was approved. So when in June this year, a plan was approved at the Cabinet of Ministers to support this strategy, it's started being implemented. So I'm very glad that the National Strategic Research Institute has supported us in this. And once again, AI is becoming one of the main competitive powers of a country, and Ukraine could use a lot without developing it. Although as of now, we are #1 in Eastern Europe by numbers of people. It's very important to start speaking to policymakers. Therefore, we are going to have 2 panels. The first one on economy and the second one on security, both subjects very critical for Ukraine. That's it from me for now, and I hope we will have a wonderful discussion here today. Thank you. On my part, I also would like to take the floor and introduce the main areas of work of the Institute in the field of artificial intelligence. So here are my slides. Alexander has mentioned already that we have established an expert council on the development of artificial intelligence in the National Institute of Strategic Research. We are planning to delve deeper into the subject. We believe that this will be one of the priorities of our research. That's a complex subject, but a very interesting one as well. So why are we involved in this? As Vitaly has mentioned, well, he loves billions. We love trillions. So 15 trillions of dollars, or 26% of the world GDP. These are the expected numbers of 2030. These numbers are about the artificial intelligence, and we surely should pay attention to this subject. Although we cannot find all the answers immediately, we need to answer the proper questions. Speaking of artificial intelligence, again, many people imagine this as something somewhere in the world far away. Actually, no. Over 50% of companies are already introducing some elements of artificial intellect, machine learning, and also these companies that introduce such technologies are noticing an increase in their productivity. Over 20 countries in the European Union already have some priorities in the field of artificial intellect. So in the European community, we are noticing that this subject is already in the policy making. So the issue is how exactly it's going to be implemented in practice. So here is a quote from a recent final report on the National Security Commission on AI in the United States of America. This is the opening word from the report. So we don't understand how deep the AI revolution is, how it's going to impact the national security and well-being. We are only starting to realize the huge impact it will have on every person and also every nation because of the digital revolution that's happening. So why exactly the National Institute for Strategic Studies is being involved in this? Well, on the one hand, we are a unique analytic center with over 30 years of analytic work supporting and informing government decisions. I don't know if we have any other institution with a similar institutional memory. Also, we have huge expertise in a number of fields, such as national security, international relations, economics, and also humanitarian policy. And we have huge experience of work with government institutions. So we are capable of defining priorities in abstract ways, but very concrete ways as well. So what is the purpose of the establishment of such an expert council? So in this slide, you can see a small quote from Henry Kissinger, the most well-known geopolitics specialist, according to whom artificial intelligence not only brings miracles, but destabilizes everything, including the nuclear capacities of the countries and also human friendship. We need to understand how adapt to the new reality. So what do we intend to do why are we establishing the Council? Well, here are the main tasks. We want to develop the ecosystem of government management in the field of artificial intelligence. As of now, government institutions are not ready for this new reality. They only have a very vague perception of what AI is. Also, here we have one of the tasks, which is the development of strategic areas of government policy. So yeah, there is some government strategy. There are some action items, but in order to make them into a number of clear steps for the development of this area, again, we need to work as a council. Also, we will prioritize research and conduce research-based discussions. Again, we are a unique institution in a sense because we can be seen as an intermediary between different government institutions, and we also have huge trust from different circles of researchers, scientists, etc. So we unite people. Also, we need to understand how artificial intelligence can impact different fields of the society. And also we can support new research projects. So things we can implement together and we can adapt to the new situation. So here is a final slide. Here are the main areas of research we want to focus on. They are artificial intelligence and its influence on geopolitics, how it will change the geopolitical situation, also how cyber attacks and also cyber vulnerabilities should be managed. This will be the topic of our discussion in our second panel. Also, the threats posed by artificial intelligence when it is in the hands of criminals, and what are the risks for the national and personal security. So we have mentioned already deepfakes. That's for now still a personal threat, but this can become a national risk as well. And also artificial intellect and diplomacy, how interconnected they are. And also here are some of the possible, some of the other possible areas, such as detection and combating different operations intended to influence public opinion. So artificial intelligence is one of the tools that can help us understand the logic of such campaigns and to counteract. Also, using open data for collecting intelligence. Again, the information is widely available right now, but the analysis of this information is limited. Also, economic forecasting on the new level, how they can be combined, what can be the consequences, including the ethical issues. And that's it from me. So thank you for your attention. We are just starting our journey in the center. We are still establishing it. We will be inviting a broad circle of experts to participate, but these are just our first steps. Thank you.
Зараз. Тоді просимо наступного.
Запрошуємо Дмитра Наталуху, Наталю Шаповал і Дмитра Завгородня. Доброго дня всім ще раз. Мене звати Уляна Полтавець. Я сьогодні буду модерувати цю панель.
Good day, everybody. My name is Ivana Movets. I will be the moderator of this panel. I am the coordinator of the experts of the Artificial Intelligence Department next to the uh, Transformation Ministry in Ukraine. Today, we have a discussion. We have Matt Sheehan present here, who is Asia from Carnegie representative. He is being on remote connection with us. Also, we have Dmitro Nataluka, who is the chairman of the Ukrainian parliament and also the chief of the Economical Development Committee. Today, we also have Natalia Shapoval, who is the vice president of the Kiev Economical School, and Dmitro Zahorodny, who is the director of the Directory of Ministry of the Informational Transformation. But before we start this panel, I would kindly ask to show the presentation on the screen if it's possible. Thank you. Briefly, regarding the committee, regarding the artificial intelligence development, I would like to present you a new presentation regarding the artificial intelligence progress in Ukraine or state. So next slide, please. So Ukraine is number one in the number of companies developing artificial intelligence in Eastern Europe. In accordance with Oxford Government AI Readiness Index in 2020. And that can be seen and understood based on the next slides. In Ukraine, we have big R&D centers of leading companies such as Amazon, Snapchat, Samsung, Google, and others mentioned on this slide. So next slide, please. Ukrainian startups are receiving a lot of support. You know the names of them. So those are Grammarly, those are Luxury, Autofactory, Slides. Next slide, please. Our companies who have their developments within AI area are known for the world, within the whole world. So those are TVOL, Global Logics, and all the other ones mentioned on this slide. Next one, please. Also, you might know that Ukraine can kind of show off with a huge amount of people or specialists. Within the last year, we had around 25,000 graduates in informational technology, and the government invested for 30 more thousand bachelors and 14,000 master's degrees to be paid for by the government for the students. Here we have a list of universities. It's not the whole list. There's a lot more of them, and the big regional centers who have those trainings and those learning programs in their universities. Also here on this map, you can see a list of AI laboratories or research facilities. We are building out the network currently, the chain of those, starting from Lviv and all the way down to Odessa. We also done a presentation regarding AI around a year ago. And throughout the last, knowing the last data, within the last year, that is information regarding specialists and engineers that we have. So there is an visible increase, which means there is a request for those. And also, it shows a positive dynamic. Also in Ukraine, we have professional conferences regarding the AI, which are being around for years. And that allows to increase the competency of our specialists, to conduct discussions, to have discussions held. Moreover, Ukraine is actively developing this ecosystem of AI governmental involvement. As you know, there's been a committee created regarding the artificial intelligence development next to the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. There's been a concept of artificial intelligence development. There's an action plan which has been approved for this conception to be implemented. And also, we've signed up to OECD principles. We are members of the Council of Europe regarding artificial intelligence, National Research Foundation, and its startup fund are actively supporting the AI project. So there are certain developments, certain achievements within this area. So what are our plans? What's going to happen next? We would like to become part of the top 20 countries in accordance with Oxford Government AI Ratings Index. And for that to happen, we need more AI labs, we need more engineers, better education programs, better educational programs, comprehensive governance, non-restrictive regulation, and we need funding for those researchers and support for them. Having all this information, we can get into our conversation. So if it's possible, please, Matt, are you here with us? Can you hear us?
Hi, Uliana, am I on?
Так.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting any simultaneous translation. So if you asked a question, maybe you could repeat in English.
Друзі, всі, хто в залі, якщо ви хочете слухати українською, будь ласка.
Anybody who's present here, please, if you wanted to hear Ukrainian, please wear your headphones. So channel 1 for
I see. I see. I'm able to turn it on here. If you could just repeat the question, I'll be able to understand from here on.
Мет, я буду говорити українською.
Matt, I'm going to speak in Ukrainian. If you want, please. Matt, can you hear us right now?
Yes, I can hear.
Отже, Мет, дуже дякую, що ти до нас
Matt,
доєднався.
thank you for joining us today. If it's possible, can you pin Matt on the screen his camera feed?
Супер, дякую.
Great.
Мет,
Okay, Matt.
доброго ранку.
Good morning to you. First of all, Matt joined us from New York City. Thank you for participating. Thank you for allocating your time for this. So Matt is a scientist within the Asia Carnegie Fund, and he spent a lot of time researching China and China's progress regarding AI. Matt, you've spent a huge amount of your career learning about the technological progress in China, specifically AI. And China, with no doubt, is one of the main players on the AI competition field. And we've watched the presentation regarding the AI market in Ukraine and regarding that Ukraine wants to become one of the top 20 countries in the world. Could you please tell us who are the other players within this competition? What is the actual world map in regards of AI competition?
Sure thing. Thanks very much for the invitation, for having me, and for letting me learn from everyone else who's presenting here today. So as Uliana mentioned, my background is in China, and specifically Chinese technology. I lived there from 2010 to 2016. And I've been working pretty much exclusively on the AI relationship, the United States-China AI relationship since 2017. And I think in terms of discussing sort of the map of AI progress worldwide, it's important to also think about this in terms of a timeline. You know, if you go back just 5 years or so to 2016, that was a point in time, or maybe say 10 years to 2011. This is sort of the start of the deep learning revolution within the scientific community and the technical community. But you always have policymakers a certain number of years behind what's happening within businesses and what's happening within the research community. So I think of 2011 to 2016 as the real takeoff in terms of both development and applications of deep learning, with the United States being kind of the epicenter of that early takeoff. And then around 2016-17 is when you have kind of two major transitions. One of them is governments getting very activated around AI, with China releasing its AI plan in 2017, the United States releasing a lighter weight one in 2016. And the second takeoff would be a very rapid acceleration of both AI progress and AI applications within China. And so from 2016 to 2021, we've kind of gone through this boom period, both in terms of the what's actually happening in terms of AI applications, but especially in terms of the amount of focus that policymakers are putting on it. And I think over this period of time, we've gone from a very vague or very simplistic description of AI power worldwide to one where we're getting increasingly specific and increasingly clear about what it means to lead in different aspects of AI. So, the most simplistic version is to say, oh, the United States is the leader in cutting edge AI research. China is the best at applying that research to make money, and Europe or the European Union leads in regulations or norms around AI. And I think as a, if you want the simplest picture, that's a decent take on it, but I want to drill down a little bit into what it means to, say, lead in cutting edge research, or what it means to lead in commercial applications. So on the research side of it, I think some of this was covered in the earlier presentations in terms of Ukraine's role in this, which is actually very impressive. But to date, still the cutting edge research is largely concentrated in the biggest tech companies and in the global leading universities. And this is probably the main reason why you'd still say United States has the lead in the absolute sort of cutting edge of research, with China making a lot of strides behind it. If you look at the top AI conferences and you say which organizations publish the most cutting edge papers, Google is usually in the lead by a large margin. It's usually Google, Microsoft, and then something like maybe MIT or Stanford behind it, and then often some Chinese universities there. So when it comes to this cutting edge research, it's still very much a, it's very concentrated in some of the largest organizations where they have both the money to hire the researchers, but also the money to use the computing power that's needed. The cutting edge AI is getting more and more compute intensive, meaning you need more computing power to carry out the training and testing of these models. And so it's getting increasingly siloed inside the largest organizations, like a company like Google or Microsoft, or even a Baidu or Alibaba. I think a lot of countries around the world are still playing a key role in this. You saw already the role Ukraine plays in R&D ecosystems globally, but I'd also point to a country like Israel as a leader in this area, and places like Switzerland are also playing a pretty important role. But I think it's an open question how important leading in cutting edge research is. On the one hand, cutting edge research, it brings prestige to a company to say that, we executed this breakthrough, we made this breakthrough. But it's also the way that the AI ecosystem works is, as soon as a breakthrough is made, it's usually published openly online, and it's immediately adopted by people throughout the ecosystem. So for example, Microsoft made a very big breakthrough in terms of computer vision in 2015. And for a very short period of time, Microsoft was the first one to make that breakthrough. They applied it and they made some money off it. But the way AI scientists work is they generally tend to share their results and share their algorithms online as soon as they make those breakthroughs. And so you very quickly have cutting edge research diffusing to everyone worldwide. And that's where it gets into the sort of commercial applications of AI. I think especially those of us who work in the policy community, we tend to focus on that research side of things because it's easy to measure and it's easy to quantify. But there is an argument that just because a breakthrough is made at Stanford University or it's made at Tsinghua University, the benefits of that quickly flow out to everyone else throughout the ecosystem. And I think that that's where many countries around the world are sort of on almost a level playing field in terms of being able to apply the benefits of AI breakthroughs in the commercial applications. So on the commercial application side, and I'm saying commercial applications, but you could also think of this as government applications, or even to a certain extent, military applications. The first wave of applications of AI was largely still within these large tech companies. This is around the period of 2014-15. Companies like Google, Netflix, Amazon, Alibaba, they were basically able to use AI on their purely online platforms to decide, Google using AI to decide what advertisements to push to people, Netflix deciding what movies to recommend to people, stuff like that. And that, a lot of money was made by the largest technology companies. But I think we're increasingly getting into the second or third wave of AI applications that get a lot more interesting and potentially a lot more impactful for countries. And that's, maybe the second wave we could say is using AI to increase the efficiency of existing information-driven businesses. So these are businesses like healthcare is in large part an information-driven business, insurance, finance, applying AI to sort of existing data sets that are out there. And this is something that I think governments should look a lot to. And I think the expert committee has been pushing in a good way in this front. And then maybe the upcoming waves of AI that are going to have potentially even a deeper impact will be using AI's ability to sense and perceive and make decisions in terms of autonomous vehicles, in terms of robotics. And this is an area where we're still in the early days. I'd say if we're trying to do a map of the world in terms of who's leading, I'd say maybe the US was a leader in that first wave of AI applications within large internet companies. In the second and third waves, China has in many ways taken the lead, or it has an opportunity to take the lead. But for all of these commercial applications, the benefits are really going to flow out globally. And it's really a matter more of which countries are ready to make their economies AI ready. That doesn't mean, it's important to have AI research centers, and it's important to have, AI specific startups, but it's just as important to have a very large trained workforce of computer scientists or people with sort of basic skills in data engineering and stuff like that. I think of that as the kind of low hanging fruit. These are the soldiers that are going to take AI and spread it out to every industry throughout a country. They're going to spread it to agriculture. They're going to spread it to insurance. They're going to spread it to finance. And so I think countries worldwide have an opportunity to train that sort of that class of workers. And I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit to be done in that area. So that's covering kind of the cutting edge research, probably US in the lead, China catching up very rapidly, depending on whether you're looking at, computer vision or natural language processing. In terms of commercial applications, you might say that China is in the lead on this, but it's really a diffused world where everyone has a chance to sort of get in on this. And the last two, which I'll just touch on very quickly, would be the sort of the military applications of AI and the regulation and norms. I'll skip over military applications because it's really not my area of expertise. On the regulations and norms surrounding AI, Europe, the EU specifically, has clearly taken a leading role on this. But I think it's also important to continue to watch what China is doing here. We tend to look at China and say, oh, it's an authoritarian government. They just want to use AI to surveil their people. And that's all true. China very much does want to use facial recognition to continue to surveil and control its people. Definitely true. But they're also starting to do much more interesting things in terms of the regulation and governance of algorithms that you're really not seeing anywhere else. And we're in the very early stages of that. But I think it's worth keeping an eye out for. So I'll leave it there.
Мат, у мене є провокаційне запитання. Ти завершив.
I have a pretty provocative question. You finished your speech in a provocative note. And yesterday there's been an article published. I hope you might have seen it. It was an interesting interview with one of the key leaders of the Pentagon software leader, who claims that China won the AI battle against US. So you spent a lot of time in China. You researched a lot of their knowledge. Can you tell us a bit more what was meant by that? Is it actually so? And if not, or why it's not so?
Sure. Yeah, this was a very splashy article by the person who was the head of software at the Department of Defense. And I think you kind of have to split the article or his claims into two pieces. His claims were, DoD, the Department of Defense in the US, is not good at software. It's not prepared for the new era of cyber warfare. And it needs to increase its adoption of technology throughout the department. That's sort of one claim. The second claim over here was China is so far ahead in AI, it's impossible for the US to catch up, and we've kind of already lost that game. And China's going to dominate not just AI, but they're going to dominate everything. They're going to dominate media. They're going to dominate global governance. I take the first part of his claims very seriously, that the US Department of Defense is not ready for this new era of cyber war, for cyber defense in an era when a lot of cyber warfare is done through machine learning, is sort of sped up and enhanced through it. I think that, yeah, from talking to people who have spent time inside the US Department of Defense, it is outdated on software, and it is going to take a very long time for such a traditional, hierarchical organization like that is, made up of layers of soldiers, of warfighters, for them to adapt to a completely new paradigm. So I take that very seriously, and I think it is a concern. I also think it probably, if you went over to the Chinese People's Liberation Army and you sort of, open the door and peel back the curtain there, you probably also find that they are maybe not nearly as prepared as anyone would hope. There are very few governments anywhere in the world that I'd say are fully prepared. In terms of his second set of claims about, the fight over the future of AI is already over, I think he's speaking, I don't think that's true. Maybe is the simplest way to put it. I think that, and I'll say it's not true for maybe two reasons. The first reason would be that we fundamentally don't know which direction AI technology will go from here. If AI continues to exist on the current trajectory where it's, some people say AI is the new electricity. It's just it's an enhancement that can be applied to any field. And maybe we've already made the big breakthroughs in deep learning and reinforcement learning. We just need to apply it. If it stays on that trajectory, maybe China does have a very good chance. Maybe China is in the lead and it has a chance to continue to be in the lead. But AI could very much take a different fork over here, where deep learning and reinforcement learning are just the beginning. And we're going to see in the future radical changes in what AI can do and its capabilities. And I think if we take that fork over there in the road, then the US and certain countries in Europe still have a very good chance of being in the lead if they're not already in the lead. You have companies like DeepMind and OpenAI and Google that are pioneering some of this technology. And I think the idea that, I think if we end up on that fork over there, the US has a very good shot at staying in the lead.
Дуже дякую, Мет. Ми повертаємося з Нью-Йорку до
Thank you, Matt. So we're gonna come back from New York City to Kiev, and now I would like to ask Dmitry Nataluka, who is the leader of the committee of the Artificial Intelligence Parliament Committee. Dmitry, as you're the chairman of the committee, I cannot avoid a question regarding the regulations. And this year, European Union initiated the artificial intelligence normalization and which will affect the market. And it is evaluated some sort of a GDPR to a certain extent for the economical development. In your personal opinion, should we regulate it or not? What should we be creating a lot of documents and papers? Thank you, Ilana. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. That's absolutely amazing subject. And Matt, thank you for an absolutely amazing intro. I think that regulating for sake of regulating, that makes zero sense. Let's be honest about this one. We can create a lot more problems than provide solutions or opportunities. But there is a different truth also, which is that Ukrainian society gets innovation a lot sooner than it is into legislation. That is pretty okay, because if you can take a glance at the cryptocurrency, they were working, they were present, and they are still used by the Ukrainian society. But legally, in the open, wide legal field, they started showing up only end of this year. That's when we started looking into those. Regarding the artificial intelligence, the story is going to be pretty much the same. It is present, it is being researched, it is working. Do we need any sort of standards? Yes, we definitely need those. But should we, for the sake of those standards, come up with a bureaucratic organization or a norm just for us being able to cross it out of the list? Let's say we've created one. I'm not supporting that idea. I think that the innovational and information technology field needs to be as liberal as possible, because that would lead to Ukraine being the competitive and able to compete with others. For example, the cryptocurrencies. We've been also talking about Ukraine becoming one of the centers of the cryptocurrency researchers, of how they move, how they are used, because that is actual money right now. And the same can be said about the artificial intelligence. I would honestly go even further, and I'm always repeating myself regarding the industrial parks legislation, which has been passed recently. No, and there is a simplification. Yes, those are for the industrial spectrum, but you need to understand that artificial intelligence, as of today, is also part of the industrial category in developed countries. So it's not about just industrial strategy, but just cyber strategies. Because technological businesses, the bigger they grow, the more informational solutions or practical solutions they need and require that they can be suffice for the business and startups in the industry. So artificial intelligence is in UK part of the industrial sector. So at least 20 countries from the European Union also in their industrial strategies are planning to use artificial intelligence. Regarding the industrial parks, we also can be talking about creating certain conditions for high-end information technology research. For example, we have a tax return for the newest equipment, or which is really required for the artificial intelligence sector researchers. It's really expensive. It can be brought in without tax, without being taxed. That allows different companies to come together and to create powerful centers where they can do research. But coming back to your question, I think that it is crucial to understand, not to regulate it as a government, the artificial intelligence, but the national policy regarding artificial intelligence. What I mean by that is not to be. So let's look a bit more specific. Let's look at North Korea. In North Korea, after COVID, well, actually, while the COVID pandemic, there's been a program which is called you know the US history is a new course of development. Well, in our country, it's been a bit monopolized by one of the political forces, parties, but we were going to be talking about the new way as a new green way, for example. So in Korea, this new way or the new, it's sorted out in two parts, and there are two fundamental things that it stands on. First one is being the new Green Deal, and second one is the new digital deal. The investments that North Korea is planning to invest into the new digital deal throughout the next 5 years is $65 billion. In 2020, they already invested more than $3 billion. And they are planning to develop within their new digital course three main parts. First one being that is 5G coverage. Second one is big data. And third is artificial intelligence. So why would you invest into it? And why, how can you count it up as economical and mathematically? They've calculated, and the worldwide companies calculated that up to 2035, the chain of value, so for 5G network, one in world, will be $3.8 trillion of US. That's around 22.5 billions of workplaces. And that's just one of the components out of those three, which are in the digital way of dealing in Korea. We were talking about a lot about the presidential university. You probably heard about that great initiative. In North Korea, they went a step further. They said that up till 2023, they will spend $2 billion to open 6 schools, senior schools, with in-depth learning and teaching of artificial intelligence. Our schools are so far learning English language or French language or math, but they will have 6 national schools, high schools, with in-depth learning on artificial intelligence. That is the national approach, the national policy for the whole thing. And we're not talking about should it be regulated or not. They defined that artificial intelligence was a component of the new program, new governmental policy for the whole country. And I think that we need to be looking at that example, and that's what we should use.
So as for the regulation, it's not that clear, but
Regarding
with the
the regulation,
ecosystem,
it's
it's
probably
very
not the
clear.
way, but regarding the system, yes, that is something we need to implement. But what about the investments? So we have different programs regarding the industrial parks or training about, or where do we find those investitions?
Speaking of the investments, yeah, in South Korea, the investments are coming mainly from the government sector, and in such breakthrough technologies, it's a normal thing. So if you imagine that the aerospace field in the US, it's only private companies, actually, no, because DARPA has spent a lot of money for the SpaceX, for instance, to be available, and these are huge amounts of money. We do not have that luxury, but we have another luxury. We can create conditions and we can encourage private business to invest into clusters, R&D centers, and development programs for startups, incubators, etc. The systems from where such new players can arise in the field of AI. The industrial parks with support from the government, this is something that I have named already. This is one of the potential opportunities for the clusters to be established. Also, we have talked to pharma companies and other companies spending hundreds of $millions each year for R&D, researching the new goods. And so this is one of the sectors. And there is a widespread practice in the world where some again, privileges are given to R&D centers in terms of tax and other conditions. And this is a way to attract researchers, scientists, the best brains to the country, and this is how new systems can be developed in the country. So I believe this is one of our forthcoming steps, and in 2022 we will try to develop a similar reform. So the mechanisms of government support are a certain tax advantages, also the state procurement. Yeah, state procurement can demonstrate to the business that there is some internal demand for what they are doing. And this can start if the government itself is not interested to buy the new solutions produced here in Ukraine. It becomes very difficult to promote those solutions to other countries. So in the system of state military and defense procurement, 70% is import. Remember this number. So indeed, the support of our defense abilities, well, it consists of buying 70% of the equipment we need abroad. We also have the statistics of government procurement in the field of machine building, for instance, equipment building, and the imports there are 40%. So this is the money that is not developing the inner market and is supporting someone outside outside Ukraine. And companies such as Grammarly could get additional support in this form. They would develop even better products, and they would be competitive on international market. So this is one of the best incentives that government can provide, state procurement. Thank you, Dmitro. And you have already mentioned the support of business, support of innovations. And let's hear from Natalia Shapoval, Vice President on political research. So what do you believe Ukraine can add to this competition? What can be the industries that can make us competitive? Thank you. I liked Dmitro's opinion on the fact that Ukrainian business has lots of potential in this regard, and together with the Ministry of Digital Transformation, we collected different pieces of research on our IT market, and it looks like we have over 4,000 companies. One third of them are product companies, one third of them are also big companies. So this is a kind of business that needs to work large scale in order to be competitive on the international market. So right now, this market is being structured in the world, just like the automotive market many years ago, where only large players could survive. And the same is happening to the IT market. So Ukraine has over 1,000 of large companies that are represented internationally. They have offices in different countries. So they are taking part in this competition, in this global structuring of the market. And we could see this in the numbers. So I hope that this will keep on happening and the capitalization of the Ukrainian companies will be growing and they will stay in this competitive segment. As for the government, my opinion is that there are many possibilities for a synergy and around the existing advantages of Ukraine. So, for instance, Ukraine has already established a brand in the production, in digitalization. So we can be skeptical about this, but among the researchers around the world, there is some very positive opinion about anti-corruption solutions and digitalization in Ukraine. We are faster in the adoption of the development, even if we are not always the ones who develop the breakthrough technologies. So, for instance, in the procurement, we have created this Prozoro system, and it's more technologically advanced than many other systems in many other countries. So Ukraine already has some brands, it already has some synergy, already has some ecosystems. So the business itself, let's say agricultural business, food business, the infrastructure business. So wherever IT business and the farm business, yeah, so of course for pharmacology as well. So wherever synergy is available, we can continue developing the ecosystem, the parks, maybe some cyber ranges where different cyber products can be tested. I believe this is something that can keep Ukraine among the leaders. And also here, Dmitro mentioned the defense sector. I believe it's very important because when China or the United States and their procurement is being discussed in the field of AI, much of that is also about the defense feature of the government, and maybe in China some business side of the government as well. So Ukraine surely needs to structure its budget in such a way that we keep the military advantages we had before this digital area. So Natalia, let us discuss also the trends on the labor market. So in the forthcoming years, we are expecting some changes caused by the automation. So one of the examples is, let's say, self-driving cars. What's going to happen with the jobs? So what we're going to do with the people substituted with the machines and robots? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I actually heard it beforehand from you. So I believe nothing bad will happen because the fundamental economy is based on the principle that people have limitless needs. So once all the drivers are substituted by bots, the investments will flow into other fields of human activity that would satisfy other human needs. So this will only entail the restructuring of the labor market. However, the challenges will remain in the labor market and the challenges for the government policy. So there will be some breakthrough innovations which will entail some disruptions, and in each of the micro segments there will be some period when, for instance, there is no more demand for Uber drivers, but let's say there is some other service, maybe someone doing massage for you while you are being driven by a self-driving car. So there will be some changes, and there will be two ways for the government to proceed. One way is to increase the support for the unemployed. Another way is to create programs for retraining, or maybe to create some synthetic programs, just as Roosevelt did in the times of the Great Depression. So the government policies will change in such a way as to adapt to this effect. And so no major catastrophe will happen, no matter what we may believe now. But also, it's a challenge for the education system. For now, it is still working to satisfy some of the existing needs. So yeah, I said metro is quite tense here. Yeah, okay. So he works for the Ministry of Education, but it's the Ministry of Economy that defines the government demand for different professions. So there is some distribution. People are trained to work in different professions, but for people to be able to adapt quickly to the fast development of technologies, we need to change the methodology of teaching so that we focus on the person's talent, and we can avoid a situation when we are training someone and in 5 years those skills will not be in demand anymore, because unless we do that, we will have to spend huge money on retraining of our people. Now, Dmytro Samhorodny from the Directorate of Digital Transformation in the Ministry of Education of Ukraine. So we have already broached the topic of education. And actually, human resources are necessary for the development of AI. AI engineers, someone who are very necessary. And could you please share some opinion on that? Okay, so how do we keep HR? I believe that's not the question to be solved by the Ministry of Education. This is generally about the opportunities in the country, including the private sector, when people see some change, whenever people understand that they can self-realize in some field, they can stay in the country. But there are two main bottlenecks here in this education story. So the first one is about the school education. We are observing some mathematics crisis. There is a number of different initiatives that encourage some change in the situation, but we are also noticing that, for instance, physics is losing the numbers of those who want to enter the university. So compared to 2013, when we had 5,000 people willing to study physics, this year we had only 1,000, and also their level of mathematics skills is lower now. So the issue is about the support of mathematics skills at school. And the main problem is right now the inequality of education in rural areas and in cities. I will later maybe share something about digitalization processes that we are encouraging. And also another issue in the higher education, when there is some training in the field of AI as well, different from South Korea, of course, but still we also have the issues of artificial intellect somehow tackled. So we already made some presentations on how a lab could be established in universities with support of private companies as well. So the problem is financing in and of itself is not sufficient to satisfy the demand of the IT market right now, and so of course the government budget cannot cope with this immense task. So I made some math, and let's say if in EPAM the average pay is $2,500 in Ukraine only. So the total budget of the company is one half of the educational budget of Ukraine. I mean the government-run education. So we are not able to dramatically increase our state funding for education. So we are talking to different IT associations, including regional ones. We we're speaking of different IT initiatives. So one of the ideas was to get some additional pay for the university teachers in the field of IT. I personally don't believe that even if they are paid $1,000 additionally, they will stay in the university just to get that 1,000 and will not decide to leave for some major company. And this will also entail conflicts because other teachers will not get this 1,000, and yeah, this inequality will spark conflicts. So we need to develop collaboration with business in the universities, and there are two practical ways to do that. One way is to promote IT and research activity. So if it suddenly becomes popular to do some research or some science together with some work in the IT, people will be more willing to do that. And right now, this is supported through the mechanism of cross-functional teams. And there is possibility to get some money for the research. There can be people from different countries on one team. And also the second part is about teaching. Teaching in the universities also should be something seen as a sign of luxury. And again, if some companies can see some strategic advantage for them in this, they can pay some additional bonuses to the people doing scientific research, or let's say to those who are also working part-time as teachers. So that's a two-way journey, but this is the vision I have. So in the committee for the AI development, we developed a mini course for school students on AI. Also, we have developed a template curriculum for the institutions of higher educations. So we are seeing the need of rapid updates of this. And as someone who works for digitalization of education, could you please tell a bit about that? Yeah, there are some strategic areas we are working with. The first one is infrastructure. So computers and internet need to be available at schools, so with the possibility to watch video, etc. So it's still something not accomplished in many places, but still there are some plans. Some money is being provided to educational institutions to buy computers. Also, there is a big program on expanding the internet connection in rural areas. The second area is to train people for them to be able to use those technologies, because in Ukraine there is a big demand for the teachers of IT technologies at school. Again, if we train those people, if they learn how to code, many of them will decide to leave for big IT companies. But if we do not train them, that's even worse. So one more area of development is digital content. And here we can observe the issue of inequality in the Ukrainian education. So we have launched the project, the Ukrainian School Online, this year. I've been involved in it for quite some time already. And the main purpose of this project is not to get through the lockdown or whatever COVID-19 limitations we have, but also it's about giving the chance for children to get high quality education. For instance, those who are in the non-government controlled areas. So there are thousands of them getting this education online already. Also, we can post there some additional content. I dream of the French language lessons, German language, sexual education, and also some digital literacy, etc. So these are the things that are not available in rural areas. So this is maybe the only way this information can become available there. So that's an opportunity to support village teacher who is quite often teaching a number of different school subjects. This way, they will be using some online content, and with support of that, will be able to provide provide for educational needs of students in rural areas. Also, one more area of development is digital services for those who want to enter universities. And also one more area, very important for the AI, is work with data. So we do not have any national registry of students, and I don't believe anyone has any precise data on their number. So these are the kinds of things we intend to introduce for the data to be available, and so that this data is used to inform managerial decisions, maybe with the use of some AI to process the data. Thank you, Dmitro. And I know that you also deal with the IT reform of education. Again, that would be a topic that we could discuss for another 4 hours. So could you please tell briefly about that? And also, how can we promote artificial intelligence in Ukraine? So let's start going through the questions one by one. So this reform of IT education, that's an initiative by Mikhailo Fedorov. Quite often we are contacted by IT companies claiming that the number of specialists is insufficient, and also this year the number of people working from big IT companies with without the higher education, just after some coding courses. It's more or less the same number as those graduating from university. So there is a huge demand. There is insufficient number of specialists. We have been working on that with several non-governmental organizations. There are many associations, IT associations in Ukraine are working on that. So they have defined different education areas. I will not go into detail right now, but from what we can understand after a number of months of working through all of those initiatives, and actually the document is available on the Ministry of Digital Transformation website. So the thing they have in common is that higher educational institutions have to be autonomous, and they have to have different approaches to management. This issue has been on the agenda for quite some time already in the Ministry of Education and in the Parliament, but it is still very pressing. So in order for us to develop collaboration with business and for the universities to be better motivated to get additional investments from the private sector, they have to be more autonomous in how they are able to spend the money, and potentially this also can have a downside, but this is something that needs to be regulated by certain KPIs for the directors and deans, etc. So it's the issue of reform of the higher education in general, and the approaches used there can be applied in any field practically. So if the university wants to work with other businesses in IT.
Thank you, Dmitry. And Natalia, another question for you. Can you please tell what are the possible improvements for Ukrainian brand enforcement as a country with a developed AI technology in the world? How we can improve that? I think, honestly, communicative focus, that's the only thing we can do at this point, because that is the only thing. We have everything we need, and we have the Ministry of uh, Cyber Ministry, and the National Communication Ministry also is working. You can look into the strategic communication, how the Ukraine is developing, but it's just lacking a bit of a focus. If we are talking about a cyber cluster or hub, and all that communication be enforced with examples, that would be a magnet which will attract. But overall, I think that basically everything we need is already here. We have all of that. Our companies already shown us a slide, right? all the top world companies are creating products are created by Ukrainian companies that can be just highlighted again and again. And I have one more provocative question to Matt, if he doesn't mind. That's going to be the last one. Matt, being a US citizen who lived in China as a researcher and being censored by the US Research Center, how do you think the artificial intelligence for Ukraine, what is a strategic partnership vector? Is it China or is it Western world?
Дуже зручно зараз не може говорити Мет.
Well, it's probably really convenient he cannot unmute himself at this point.
All right, sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute the mic. I need someone to do it for me. In terms of sort of picking sides, US and China, I honestly think that the wise advice for many countries that are kind of, you know, in the middle of the pack or maybe the upper middle of the pack for artificial intelligence is to try your best to avoid picking sides for now. Both the US and China have a lot to offer in terms of partnerships. And you know, as the world gets increasingly divided between these technological blocks, there's actually a lot of benefits to be gained by trying to effectively, you know, play the middle ground in between the two countries. I think that another way to look at it also, if you kind of get outside of just purely the US-China dynamic, is that when you look at areas, especially like research, even though the political environment is getting very divided, the global research community still remains very, very interconnected. American scientists, Chinese scientists, Israeli scientists, European scientists, they all still go to the same conferences. They still collaborate on papers together. And so I think that despite the fact that if you look at something that's very political like 5G, it feels like you have to pick sides one way or the other. In most other areas of AI, it's possible to draw on and gain from both sides. Maybe a last point there would be, when a country like Ukraine is looking for partners, it's important to look beyond US and China, and that a country like Israel is, you know, a real global leader in AI in lots of ways. It's probably top 5 in terms of AI research globally. Same for a country like South Korea. And I think right now the partnerships with those countries often get overlooked by people who are sort of very focused on this US-China divide. So I guess my advice or my recommendation for a country that would be in Ukraine's position is, 1, as much as possible, avoid picking sides. 2, when you are looking for partners, look outside of the US-China paradigm, look towards Israel, other countries in Europe. Switzerland is another great country for AI research. So I think it's very easy to get attracted to the brand names that are in the US and China, but there's just so much more going on specifically in the research realm. I think there's a lot to be gained there.
Дякую, Мет. Також дуже зручно, що у нас є
Thank you,
представництво.
Matt. It's absolutely amazing we have Switzerland representatives here. Also, we will be joined by Mr. Alexander Brayko, who's the deputy of the Cyber Transformation Ministry chairman. And if we can, we will put him on screen. He will be joining us a bit later. He wanted to say a couple of words. So, Mr. Alexander. I can hear you, and I believe you can hear me as well. Yes, but we still cannot see it. Well, unfortunately, video is not available.
Якщо можна включити відео, пане Олександр.
If you can, would you please turn on your video camera, Mr. Alexander?
Чудово.
Супер. Ну що, давайте я швидко. Насправді тут вже не про привітання.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to be brief because I'm running late a bit. I would like to say that I would like to say a great thank you to the uh, to the people who organize this meeting, that we can have a discussion. We really treat really seriously artificial intelligence development because we think, so we have different views on it. First one being that we think we have absolutely amazing companies and we have potential regarding huge world. Tech giants are capable of doing R&D in our country. So our guys would be working on absolutely amazing projects with huge budgets and with an actual opportunity to use it somewhere in the real business world, and that they gain experience within it. That is one thing that is part of our perspective when we started that with a committee regarding artificial intelligence, which is led by Vitaly Honcharov. And overall, the idea is one of the economical drivers for Ukraine in the future in the cyber economics, informational economics. And the second point of view is really crucial, as we have right now computer vision being developed, and so how fast it's development, and NLP, how natural language processing is developed absolutely amazingly fast. It allows to optimize procedures and process within the government, and having conversations like this one and meetings like this one, we would like to have an answer, to gain an answer where that can be used within the governmental apparatus. So Ms. Chapoval already discussed that a couple of minutes ago. What are the real use cases for artificial intelligence? We have certain conversations with other interested governmental organizations. It's absolutely amazing that we have the Ministry of Interior, which are trying to optimize certain processes using artificial intelligence. Because not so far ago, we had a conversation with the farming business ministry, and they are trying to use computer vision. They want to use it, and there are certain ideas how to use it in the customer service. There are a lot of projects which look quite like a fantastic book, but we can see examples in other countries and businesses that it's not just a fantasy book. It is working. It would be great if we could implement the same thing in our country. That's why thank you to everyone, and we know what we do, we know where we can use it, and we know that it's not just an abstract vision. It is an actual thing that can be applied, implemented, and that's about it for me, and that is the only thing I have to tell you. So thank you to everyone once again, and have a great conversation. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. I would invite everybody to a coffee break, whoever's present physically here in the meeting room, and whoever is on Zoom, please join us in 10 minutes. Friends, we are gathering here at 17:50. Thank you.
Ну, ми будемо починати, так що давайте покликаємо всіх, хто там є.
So we're probably going to start, so please let the other people who are present here know.
Уляна, ми можемо вже починати чи ні?
Ulana, can we start?
Так, ну, здається, більшість людей вже на своїх місцях, тому давайте починати.
I think most of the participants are already here, so probably let's start. We're gonna skip the traffic jams.
Мені ще подивимось. Так, я думаю, що ми зараз будемо спілкуватися.
I think that right now we gotta be talking about the artificial intelligence. What we mean by the artificial intelligence is that the security usage or defense usage is the actual thing which is altered and which has a lot of changes to it thanks to artificial intelligence. And you probably can see that the balance is changing, and the artificial intelligence is one of the most compatible regarding United States and China parts. And the question is, where does Ukraine fit here, and what are our abilities and possibilities? And we have absolutely amazing speakers here. And first of all, that's Yuri Husov, who is the general director of Ukrainian Defensive Solutions. And this business is responsible for most things that happen regarding the defense and military activities in Ukraine, because everything that they produce is affecting every single Ukrainian. And also we have Mark Rogers here present, professor of the computer technology department from United States University. Mark knows Ukraine quite a bit. He's been working for 10 years with certain projects of cybersecurity in Ukraine, and Mark will provide us with a really interesting perspective. Next one would be Alexander Puty, who is the deputy of the Governmental Special Communication Service. This service also provides information for the artificial intelligence, and data for the artificial intelligence is kind of like an oil, like fuel. So Alexander Puty will provide artificial intelligence with its fuel or oil. And the more developments are done regarding artificial intelligence, the more data, and the more crucial is data security. And also, we have Vladimir Batrak, who's a military expert, director of the Military and Weaponry System Research Center. I've been reading through Valentin's articles regarding artificial intelligence and modern-day weapons systems, and his views are really up to date in today's world, and we are going to have a really amazing discussion. Firstly, I probably provide a helicopter view. I'm just curious to talk to Valentin first. Valentin, so just an overall question. Artificial intelligence, as per my perspective and most of the experts, is a geopolitical tool at this point. Do you support this view? And what do you think can disrupt the status quo for US, Russia, and China? First of all, thank you to the International University of Strategic Communications that they invite not only the governmental sector for this discussion. First of all, I would agree that artificial intelligence is a geopolitical tool, modern day geopolitical tool, and a huge problem is Russia right now, and a huge complication is Russia. And I want it to be stated that Russia is also looking into the same as Ukraine does, as one of the countermeasures regarding Russia is looking into asymmetrical weapons and approaches to counteract the Western world. One of those is artificial intelligence, and using their main ideas, the counter-radio systems. So they want not to have advance and not to move forward, but to disrupt the United States communication and signals capabilities using those systems. And as it is known, the United States are not that focused on the countermeasures, but they are more regarding the dominant position in the air. For example, regarding Ukraine, the most threat for us regarding Russia is that Russia developed themselves in the automated management systems and control systems within the weapon systems, army units, and weaponry. The most important tasks throughout the training Zaki 2020 and Zaki 2021 were actually working on the control measures. And that is why that is a challenge for us. And Russia itself definitely is the one who is disrupting the world quite a bit. How do you think? Have you seen recently any cases when the artificial intelligence tilts the balance, which would be quite obvious for everybody? So then let's come back to, well, let's remember when it happened in the artificial intelligence in 2020, when the founder, well, not founder, sorry, well, Elon Musk mentioned that even in modern world, the modern day F-35 plane has zero chance against the unmanned flying vehicle, which has artificial intelligence. And he also mentioned something we need to discuss. And he mentioned that it's not just with remote control aircraft, but with artificial intelligence on board. Why I'm actually pointing that out, that because in Ukraine we have a lot of developments, and Ukraine is actually number 3 in the rating of the Eastern Europe regarding artificial intelligence research. There's 57 companies were doing that up to as of 2019. There's a deep knowledge research, and they mentioned that only Russia and Poland have more companies than Ukraine in this regard. And what is interesting is that our researchers and development are more focused on remotely controlled equipment and vehicles. In the defensive structure, for example, as well, the only out of line is the Zaporizhia privately owned company Infocom, who is actually for 25 years working on artificial intelligence, and they've reached some amazing results. For example, a police officer robot who can make decisions, and also creating an unmanned flying vehicle, unmanned vehicle Spartan, altogether in cooperation with Cross. And I'm really happy that this year in Ukrbоронпром we mentioned that one of their activities and their research will be the unmanned armored personnel carrier, which is really interesting. But we think that not only those huge silhouettes that we work on, we also need to pay attention to those smaller developments and achievements. And thanks to the president's order on a parade this year, we first in Ukraine had demonstrated, well, let's say so, battle robots, if you wish to call them. So there were 7 platforms which participated in the parade, and 4 of them were made by privately owned companies, robotics, and 3 others were done by Global Dynamics, which is a company from Lviv. And also, I would also like to remind, so we need to think quite a bit, because from the presented robots, there's only privately owned companies who produce those. I'm not mentioning Phantom, but there was a mixture of government organization and private-owned company. I'm not convinced that all of the developments all the effort should be successful. Not even like successful, not the ones which are not completely successful are a really important lessons. So, for example, Phantom was a pretty good lesson experience. And now, as from my perspective, it's really important that in Ukraine, we widen some kind of functionality of our developed products, because Russia, as I already mentioned, they look not only into, we have logistical robots for the most part, a bit of reconnaissance robots, and just you can count on your fingers like striking or attack robots. So there's no such thing as a chemical radioactive defense robot, or there's no robot for signal combat or radio combat. And if we had a mixture of those, that would be great. And also I would like to mention that privately owned companies, they've reached their roof, they reached their ceilings. There's nothing else that they can develop. And reason for that being that in the actual battle platform, 80% are the control systems for the weaponry and the weaponry themselves. And that is something that the government has a hold of. So there are platforms that can be rocket mounted on them, but that needs to be done only with governmental involvement. I had a conversation with all the CEOs and with the companies who work on land robots or underwater robots, and every one of them are ready to cooperate with the government. So that I think is really important.
Actually, I also saw Elon Musk announcing his system, and interestingly enough, he was announcing this from a military base. There were 200 pilots before him, and to them, he was telling, guys, in just 5 years, the system we are creating right now will substitute you. So yeah, he said back then in March 2020 that the era of those battle aircrafts was over. Yeah, but coming back to Yuri Gusev, as far as I remember, it takes $3.5 billion for something like this to be developed. So Yuri, we are discussing quite lofty subjects here, but your company has quite an important place in this industry. You are checking what your competition is doing. So could you please share your opinion and your long-term vision as the head of such a big structure? Thank you, Vitaly. Dear colleagues, I would like to join Valentin in expressing gratitude to the organizers and the Institute of Strategic Research, because that's a very relevant discussion. We are paying a lot of attention to artificial intelligence over the recent time. So I would like to start with the quote by Volodymyr Harbulin. There is his picture here in this room. So 1 year ago, when he was presenting his new book on how to overcome Russia, he said, the global access to technologies, automation, the introduction of artificial intelligence will be the basis of the new weapons, which will be even more powerful than the ideas of nuclear weapons. So we are noticing this change. We are noticing a real technological tsunami. And indeed, the wars of the future, of which Volodymyr Harbulin is writing in his book, and he is the former head of the board in the Ukrainian defense industry enterprise, the wars of the future are going to be the wars of technologies. And we can already see that on IDEX, for instance, in Abu Dhabi, there was a record number in automated unmanned platform, not only the flying ones, but also the ground ones. And we are also working to introduce the driverless combat vehicle, and we are the countries, the armies that are going to integrate artificial intellect in automated platforms, they will have a strong advantage on the battlefield. It is quite clear that the battlefield is, in the future at least, this will be the competition of technologies and robotized platforms. And when Elon Musk was speaking to those combat airplane fighters, he was also thinking of saving lives of those pilots, because the use of those AI systems will first and foremost help to save the life and health of the military. Also, for us, the study, and actually this year we did a big research on the prospects of the use of new technologies in the defense industry, different aspects of artificial intelligence. So in the future, surely we will see the need to further invest into this field. And clearly the countries, the armies, the defense industries which integrate some elements of systems of artificial intelligence will have some clear advantages. It's very important for our country because we need to have symmetrical capacities in our competition with the enemy, because the numbers, of course, are smaller when we compare ourselves to the enemy. But in terms of innovation, in the terms of technologies, this is something where we can excel and overcome them. And also, there is a well-known example, the example of the DARPA agency in the United States of America. For decades, they are working on the issues of the new technologies in the defense industry, also the issues of artificial intelligence. And in this field, it's very important to understand who are the key customers of the defense industry. They need to be convinced that it is necessary to develop such products. Also, since Ukraine has a huge potential in terms of new technologies, innovations, IT specialists, and the technologies that are right now are being manufactured for civilian needs. This can become the basis of huge cooperation with NATO countries. And in this regard, we are working with global corporations, paying huge attention to artificial intelligence. So Ukrainian defense industry enterprise is aiming for the same level as the leading companies in the industry. We are striving to use the opportunities to create the strategy of using artificial intelligence in the new products currently developed in Ukrbranprom, and the transformation of our enterprise according to the new law recently signed by the president. It coincides with the intentions also of the partners who are ready to work with us in order to accomplish some common goals. Thank you, Yuri, for your detailed response. And it is great to see that you have done this research, so you are working in parallel with the market, and in fact, you are somehow ahead of the market in some respects. So for 10 minutes right now, we are going to talk on cybersecurity, and then we will come back to the discussion of Ukraine. So first, I would like to ask Mark Rogers, who is joining us on Zoom. So Mark, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So I will be asking my question in Ukrainian. Hopefully Mark will hear the interpretation. So Mark, could you please tell us something about cyberspace? That's a new, I think, for many. Many people don't understand that this is in fact a parallel world with a physical one, and some countries are already fighting in this space. So what can you say about these trends, the wars in the cyberspace? Because we all know about the physical wars, but what's happening there in the cyberspace, and what role is played there by the artificial intelligence? Because we all watched the Matrix movie and we understand that this is a place where artificial intelligence belongs. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And you're right. You know, the warfare has transitioned from the physical to the cyber, and it has always been attractive simply because of its asymmetric character. Smaller enemies can attack larger enemies. It's kind of balanced some of these things out. It's harder to figure out who's doing the attacking. And AI has really been a game changer. It has increased the ability for asymmetric conflicts. It's really taken care of some of the issues related to lack maybe of numbers of people by automating tasks, by coming up with decision making. In the battlefield of cyber, AI is really, you know, has multiple different uses, both offensive and defensive, as we heard from one of the other speakers. It's being used for things like intelligence gathering, behavioral predictions, trying to predict what the other side is going to do. For decision making, how do you make faster decisions quicker than the other side? It definitely is what we call a force multiplier for traditional warfare and cyber warfare. It really, you know, one of its underlying characteristics, and we've seen that in the past few years in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, is its ability to destabilize. So it's a destabilizing force, destabilizes socially, politically, economically, and that's where it becomes a force multiplier for traditional warfare. We're also seeing it in the realm of the autonomous and intelligent type of weapons, but more so now we're seeing this artificial intelligence being used, as I said, to do a lot more of this predictive, a lot more of the destabilization that we've seen in the past, and that's predicted to continue and to be part of the weapons or the weaponization of artificial intelligence.
Марк, чи можеш ви також...
Mark, could you also add something about deepfakes and what's going to happen because of them, and what is already happening because of that technology?
Yes, deepfakes is a good example of artificial intelligence that can be used both, I guess, good and bad. We're seeing, as far as the trends, that deepfakes is part of this, you know, the information warfare type of approach. And we're seeing the trends are, it's much easier to do very sophisticated deep fakes. It's cheaper, more accessible, so it's being used more often. And part of this is not necessarily just because of the weaponization, but we've got the media industry, Hollywood here in the United States, which is using the same technology that is being used to destabilize someplace or make it look like somebody's saying something, a politician or a leader or somebody that you want to disparage. That technology has been coming out of the media industry for years, and they've been improving that. So there's a much lower barrier to entry for those wanting to use it, and it's being harder to detect these very sophisticated technologies. So we're seeing the risks of deep fakes of everything from disinformation efforts, misinformation, destabilization, and undermining of the public trust. And that technology is only on the increase. As I mentioned, we're predicting we're going to see more of it being used in the cyber warfare, in basically geopolitical conflicts, simply because, and not just by state actors anymore, but by smaller players. Because like I said, the barrier to entry now, the technology is more available. Technology can be hosted on a different platform, so you don't have to own that technology yourself. And the cost of doing this has gone down significantly, which should increase its use.
Марк, дякую. Не відключайте.
Thank you. Mark, please stay with us. I will have some more questions to you about Ukraine because you have worked here for 10 years, so we will come back to you in a couple of minutes. And now I have a question to Alexander Paty. So Americans have invented the internet and we are struggling with that technology. And this is a place from where we get cyber threats. So what can you tell us about the readiness of Ukraine? And in the context of our today's event, what is the place of artificial intelligence there? So what is your expert vision there? First, I will join all the other participants in expressing gratitude to the Strategic Research Institute. So you asked me an interesting question, but first I would like, as a professor who has years of experience in teaching, I'd like to start from the definitions. So I will briefly comment, and again, I will start with a definition for us to be able to further develop this idea and to express my views in response to your question. So this is one of the possible definitions of artificial intelligence for the purposes of this conversation, and so that we can avoid some of the stereotypes when comparing human intellect and the artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, that's a system or a machine, for instance, a computer, which is capable of imitating some human behavior in order to perform certain tasks and gradually can learn using the information or data it gets, and also it has certain use in certain field. So chatbots, that's one example. Another example is some kind of smart support tools. So for instance, autopilots for the pilots, or at the So here, this is my position, and based on that, what can we tell about artificial intelligence in the systems of cyber security or cyber defense, or in the field of cyber threats? So if artificial intelligence can perform certain tasks, and if some algorithm or process is developed to respond to cyber incidents or attacks or other anomalies in the information systems or in the cyberspace, then we are able to use elements of artificial intelligence to automate certain tasks and in order to increase our efficiency. So for instance, the efficiency of our incident response team. So some tasks can be the analysis of large amounts of specific data. Artificial intelligence can learn to analyze the data because we know the structure and origin of the data. So this gives our team the understanding on how to respond to a particular incident. So the artificial intelligence or some elements of it, this is some useful technology enabling the increase of efficiency of our response to cyber incidents. But there is another side to that. If we have an established procedure of response to cyber incidents, we may consider that on the other side, on the side of the enemy, they also have certain procedure because there is always a certain plot behind every attack, and there is always some intellect, some smart approach to different elements of the attack, and thus the attack is becoming more effective. So we have to keep this in mind. We have to remember that the evolution of cyber security can arrive at a situation when there is a competition not between people, but the competition between artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence tools that are more effective in their work, they are overcoming in their attacks. And thus, we are coming back to the good old story of competition between technologies and defense against those technologies, but on a new technological level, at the level that is much smarter than before. Complex approaches are developed for the attacks, and those who want to defend themselves, they also have the same increase in the complexity if they want to protect themselves and to be agile and to respond quickly and efficiently. So it is quite popular these days to use the word hybrid. We are speaking of hybrid attacks and hybrid threats. So we can say that artificial intelligence also hybridizes the warfare, and this is reflected in the increased efficiency. Also, in the beginning, I have mentioned that artificial intelligence systems, they imitate the behavior of people. So in the theory of complex systems, we have two different concepts: the movement of the system and the behavior of the system. The movement is unpredictable, but we can describe it formally. We can try to compute the movements of the system, but in the complex system, it becomes impossible to make a clear prediction of anything. So we start speaking of behaviors in this case. The same is true when speaking of humans. They are too complex to predict, but we can speak of behavior. So this is the danger of artificial intelligence. They are too complex and we cannot always predict what's going to happen because the system has a behavior. And there is a big number of incoming data, and whatever small the change is, it can entail the change in the behavior. And the cyberspace, this is the only space in which the warfare is happening. That's the only space created by the human, and this space as of now is too complex for us to speak of the movements of this space, but it's already described by behavior. So some small change is happening, and in whatever way it is reflected in the space, we cannot predict that.
So recently there's been a case where the messenger app went down. There was a mistake of some sort or some other actions we are not aware of up till today. But those actions led to it. That's unpredictable, and we cannot tell what would be the condition of that or other systems. So if we look at AI in the sphere I'm talking about, you don't really need to be terribly afraid of it replacing a person in the decision-making process or any other or tasks, but using a system like that are increasing the effectiveness of both sides, the attackers and the defenders as well. Alexander, so as far as I understand, we can have a situation coming up that in the financial sector, for example, when in New York State on the market, most of the transactions are conducted not by real human people, but using algorithms. As far as I understand, that is the future in the cyber threat, where most will be competing only using algorithm and competition of algorithm. Yes, it can be said like this, but I would like to emphasize that those algorithms, as a beginning, are developed by a human being with a certain demand. Other problem is that those might be adaptive and be self-learning based on the information they have, and that is a risk because the system has an unpredictable behavior. We do not know what's going to be the behavior of it, so there is a bit of a threat there. But humankind always was undefined. Basically, we always took the risks, so that is something that can be said about human beings and humanity altogether. If we say there is a risk, it doesn't mean that we should not use that technology carefully. Yes, to pay attention to it. Yes, we need to know what it can lead to. Yes, we definitely need to think about that. And even saying that, using those technologies and elements, we need to develop them. Okay, thank you. That is my position. Okay, so let's go and focus on Ukraine even a bit more. Yuri, I think that if I were to ask just any Ukrainian, they will think that the governmental organizations and businesses do not have artificial intelligence technology embedded. That's a stereotype from my position. But if we take a look in more detail in a certain industrial parts, you can find quite smart solutions and development. My question is, what are your plans? What do you plan in regards in your Ukrainian defensive enterprise? Yes, definitely there is a national secret thing, so you definitely will not go through all the details and everything, but an overall view, what can be done. I will start by this weekend. Me and my 10-year-old son, we were watching Star Wars, which is a really popular movie, which has a lot of episodes, filmed by George Lucas. And first of all, I understood that 10 and 20 years ago, I've been watching this movie with a different perspective and different perception, and a lot of things that are happening on the screen can definitely become a real thing. Even though 20 years ago, that was fantastic. We could never think that that's going to be possible. And second part means that my 10-year-old son is looking and watching those movies as that can really happen in 10 or 20 years in real life. And that is actually changing your perception of the world. Because, for example, the defensive enterprise, defensive equipment enterprise, throughout the first many years of Ukrainian independence, was under finance. There was not a lot of investments in the modernization. You could never even dream about artificial intelligence and having a lot of problems, different factories and plants. We have, for example, a lot of problems with our paychecks not coming on time and not modernized development lines, and we are using outdated technology. We still must, and we are obligated to think and work with artificial intelligence and to invest into it. So that's why we've started this work, and we've conducted a certain research, and we understand that this work is impossible without involving specialists, without involving experts and partners who already have developed a lot more and are developed themselves a lot further than Ukrainian governmental defensive enterprise. And definitely, it is important for us to create a strategic view, knowing that certain strategic documents have already been passed and strategies have been passed regarding the defensive sector, and it has been approved by the National Security Council, and it also has been approved by the president. And there are a lot of other strategic documents based on which we are obligated to create a strategy and an implementation plan regarding development of system which will benefit from the artificial intelligence. And before that, prior, we need to analyze what is currently in our hands, what we have in our factories, in our engineer groups, and together with our partners, implement the actions that are necessary to achieve technological advance and technological compared to our enemy countries, and that will allow for our products to be competitive on the international defensive solutions market. So that is the overall answer. So, okay, then that brings me to additional questions. For example, Ukraine, in according with the Oxford Analytics research, we are number one. So that's talking commercial part of the artificial intelligence. In Eastern Europe, we are number one. We have the most people involved in it, and we have the most number of companies. Are there any foreseeable interfaces or cooperation of governmental huge enterprise with the companies which work on it? And overall, is there any development culture for Ukrainian defense enterprise? So usually you work with hardware for the most part, like heavy hardware. Probably I'm wrong with that, but like, how do you plan to cooperate with companies like mentioned and within the artificial intelligence sector, which is currently develops based mostly on the Western world concepts? Well, first of all, I will repeat myself, and it's important for us to form a strategy. And once again, we understand that without involving specialists from corporate sector who have certain experience working in the civilian market and international partners, implementation of artificial intelligence being used in the defensive enterprise, that's impossible. That's number one. Number two, we are actually cooperating with the Ministry of the Cyber Transformation. We have a memorandum passed, and we plan to do it working together on projects which are involving artificial intelligence in our programs with the Cyber Transformation Ministry. And altogether, I would also like to say that we, together with the Ministry of Informational Transformation, with Mikhailo Fedorov, also are thinking on creating an accelerator platform, which would be the exact interface for technological companies to get involved, privately owned foreign companies who can enforce the defensive capabilities of Ukraine. Valentine, I have a question for you as well. You know that what's going on in Ukraine regarding the governmental institution sector and institutions which were developing or are developing artificial intelligence systems. What would be your perspective on the conditions or state of those institutions? Can they actually be doing something right now, or are they even doing something? Because, as from my perspective, structures which understand Ukrainian defensive enterprise, those are governmental. So basically, government understands government within inside, and cooperation between the governmental entities is easier and faster than working with the open market with privately owned businesses. Because we in the past have an institution that actually does something. Well, thank you, Mr. Vitalik, for your question. Mr. Alexander actually inspired me to one lyrical statement, which definitely has to do something with this situation. So listen, basically today we have an article published in Russia regarding Russia preparing to counter to fight off Ukraine from the sea axis. Sorry, from the north, I believe, right? Well, yeah, we would like it would be the North Sea, but so basically, we're talking about an article which has a scenario how you can capture Odessa, Kharkiv, and Dnipropetrovsk and Kherson regions being Russia. And it's quite curious, and that is really important. This article has been written by the deputy of the general director or head of the strategical researchers, Alexei Kostev. And quite curiously, is in this case, is that previously we had that information published in 2008, and whoever was following the Russian media psychological operations, Igor Jadan in 2008 written Operation Mechanized Operations. That was published by a political expert. Why I'm emphasizing that, Mr. Alexander paid attention to that any tasks that require art or creating something new probably cannot be done by the artificial intelligence. Whoever knows what is reconnaissance units, Carl Leeuwenhoek, you probably know about. That is a handbook, basically, for any reconnaissance or intelligence unit. Because Carl Leeuwenhoek proved that a human being with a specific psychological, which has a specific psychological structure, any sort of, it might be raised by a brave person or might be raised by a person who is not that brave, he will act in a defined way throughout his whole life. So that's why we have a paradigm. We know that Putin is really afraid because he wants to live. And the question being like, will he start the war or will he not start the war? And the question is, can this be solved by artificial intelligence? Is it the line for the Putin? He will start the war if he doesn't lose his life. And this will be an easy win for him as Crimea. Or will he not? Those are the questions that I wanted to state. And regarding the question you've asked, in our institution, what's going on there and what is happening there, in order to change the situation, we need to transfer to a systematic approach of our decisions made and to what should be done. So just a couple questions. First one being automation. In accordance with certain data, Ukraine spent for creating automated system of management more than $600 billion. That is a lot of money. And we don't really see those results, right? OpenAI, but even those the developers are assuring us that their results are present, that they can be seen. But the developers are saying, basically today I talked with one of them regarding the Zwin system, which has received a lot of criticism. And the developers were saying, well, you know, the case is like this. We cannot do anything because we do not have any communication with the military. And the institution of the general contractor is not working. And that is more of an administrative question. Probably we should, when we So a general constructor, for example, of unmanned air vehicles or land robotized complexes, if we change the situation and we create an institution of people who can make those decisions and once they will be held accountable for certain systems. So, for example, everybody remembers in 2017, Ukrainian Defensive Enterprise, those previous directors, they were demonstrating Hornets and they were saying they were talk to coalition Korsilov so that they can have missile system installed them, and nothing came out of that. Why did it happen? Because there was nobody held accountable for it. There was nobody assigned responsible for it. There was no structure, and nobody assigned. Right now, let's take a look to the ground or sea unmanned or even air unmanned vehicles. Most, well, 99%, I would say. I had 100, but that was a mistake because we have Antonov who's also developing something, Halkadam also developing something. So I cannot be saying 100%. And Lush also developing something. Debatsikal are also developing their projects. So there's a lot more positives. Yeah, right. But the system will start working. We talked to a lot of people actually. The system will start working only when the government will organize conditions for it. When the government grabs everything and will create the governmental partnership when they talk to, for example, KB Robotics, who presented 4 platforms on the parade. They were saying like, we cannot create a weapon system. We need somebody to do that. We cannot make serious, we cannot produce a lot of them because we do not have enough space. We do not have enough buildings and plants. Somebody needs to help us out with that. Even though the government has a couple of mechanisms, one of them being is actually the system of the weapon management is a lot more expensive. But another one means when we create a consortium, for example, for an unmanned air vehicle, the government has an ability to finance the organization of manufacturing, and any privately owned business can be attracted by that, and they are actually ready to cooperate. They're ready to be the subcontractors and for any point. So basically, in order for us to advance, and one more question, actually, administrative question, actually, to be more clear. So Velik Robotics and Ukrainian Defense Enterprise, so both of them got motivated, and within a certain time, I asked a person who was held accountable, was assigned responsible, and the person says like, we are really happy, we are advancing, we are motivating them, but we do not know where those unmanned vehicles can be assigned to within the military units. The national military headquarters cannot tell us what are the units that will use them. So we need to unite our special expertise who can be investors. We need to involve government as a coordinator. I'm not sure which level it should happen, but it might be several levels. For example, as holdings level, who will be based on the Ukrainian defensive enterprise, or that might be agencies. Second level, which not agencies, but agency, one of them, which will be part of the Ministry of Technical Development. But there might be different forms and ways to cooperate. But if we do not cooperate as one united system, it will be absolutely terribly complicated to move forward and advance. So that is my position. So thank you. I've already probably touched on a painful subject for you. I understand that, but let's then go to the next questions. But I just have a request to Yuri and Valentin right now, not to answer it right now, but think of 2 or 3 areas that Ukraine needs to invest in artificial intelligence, and we will come back to that within 5 minutes when we talk about cybersecurity. After we talk about cybersecurity, I'm just curious, what do you think are the priorities for Ukraine regarding independence, balance of force? So what needs to be invested in? And right now we're gonna talk to Mark and talking out about the cybersecurity, but we want Mark, can you hear us?
Yes.
В мене до вас 2 питання.
I have 2 questions. You have 10 years of experience analyzing what's going on in Ukraine, what is in Ukraine. You've been involved and you are still involved in cybersecurity projects right now. First question being, like, what are the crucial problems we have right now? What needs to be solved straight ahead, or probably had to be solved even yesterday? And second questions would be a bit more critical, but regarding the future, what is right now going on with the education system regarding cybersecurity, and in particular with artificial intelligence? Because if Alexander is saying that future of the wars is in cyber wars, and we still have a person involved there, because the person is the one who creates algorithms, so that in order to Ukraine being present and being capable of doing something in this area, we need specialists. So two questions: what are the immediate problems, and what are the educational states and machine learning, what needs to be done in Ukraine? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in some of the activities over the past few years related to cybersecurity in the Ukraine. And so I'm looking at this obviously as an outsider. And I think some of the issues that I see, and they can be addressed by some of the things that we'll talk about in the second part of the answer, is obviously, like other countries, a real lack of, a skilled, specialists in this, the skilled cybersecurity professionals. That is always there. It is, if you look at the statistics worldwide, we do not have enough people, and Ukraine is no exception, enough people with the skills to fill these jobs, to do the research, to help develop some of these technologies, or to actually be those individuals that are sitting in those security operations centers reacting to the different attacks. So while that is definitely something that is an issue in Ukraine, it is also a worldwide issue. The other thing that I'm seeing, and the Ukraine is doing a much better job, I think, of this than in the past, is really that providing a climate where there is this good, what we call good public-private initiatives. Because industry, there's a lot of mentions of Elon Musk and Tesla, and there's obviously like Google. Industry is driving a lot of the research in this, not necessarily, they're partnering with academic institutions and with governments, but it really has to be there's a lot of industry-driven technology. So having a really good climate of cooperation between public and private, between industry and businesses, and having that climate that is, I guess, conducive to tech development and tech transfer to occur is important. And I think the Ukraine is doing a better job at that than before, but I still think that there are some efforts that have to go into that. And as I mentioned, one of the major issues with this, and I would argue that no country is at an appropriate level of readiness to deal with cybersecurity. So it's simply because it's such a big attack space. We may be prepared today, but we can't, we don't know what's going to be happening in the future. But I would say that, my observations with working with the Ukraine, I've actually seen a very long-term strategic approach going into this in a lot of thought. But like I said, there still are some things that have to happen. And that's kind of a generalization. And part of that goes back to that second issue about how important education is. And we're seeing that in the US. We're seeing that part of that skilled workforce is higher education, K-12, as well as higher education. And that is really looking at, going towards that, what are we going to see in the future? And some of the initiatives that are out there are, like we're doing in the United States here, is we're looking at embedding artificial intelligence, machine learning classes into our core curriculum for our cybersecurity programs, with the feeling that you cannot be a properly trained cybersecurity professional, a cybersecurity or an information warfare specialist, if you do not understand how, or the basics at least, of artificial intelligence, machine learning, the capabilities, the vulnerabilities, things like that. So we're looking at in the United States, embedding that into our core programs as part of our standardized curriculum through organizations like NIST and their initiatives with a standardized curriculum or standardized education program across the United States. And this is part of one of the program, we're seeing this as a way of future-proofing to some extent. Education is becoming extremely important. We also need to have those researchers and that next generation of scientists coming out of our programs that actually understand cybersecurity as well as artificial intelligence, simply to better develop offensive and defensive capabilities. And we're looking at the intersection now of I guess, fields where you are getting folks that basically are having dual degrees that specialize in the artificial intelligence and the data sciences and understand the vulnerabilities and understand cybersecurity. And that's one way that, at least in the United States, we're looking at filling the demand we have right now and looking at future-proofing and understanding some of the future types of attacks that we're going to see coming out of this, artificial intelligence. As somebody mentioned, we're not seeing this as replacing the humans anytime soon. We're seeing this as supplementing, which means then we have to, as humans, have that capability to add to those algorithms.
Марк, дякую. Сподіваюся побачити вас.
Thank you, Mark. I hope to see you soon in Ukraine. And I hope that you will be in this field, brings the best practices, best known practices from US. And we can create a couple of programs. For example, in the KPI in Kharkiv, I know that the Ukrainian Defensive Enterprise are working closely with KPI University. That is just one of the networks. And if you will be training one of the centers, that's where the data transfer information transfer will happen. So thank you again. So the organizers are telling me that we have around 7 or 8 minutes to sum it all up and to finish. So an overall questions to speakers, if possible, really briefly, or probably not real fast, but briefly and clear. Were those 2 questions. First question, what are the areas that need to be activated and invested in regarding artificial intelligence? The second one is, what is the balance or what is the logic of licensing those technologies? Development, the technology licensing on our own, or buying the licensing from other countries? What would be your understanding of this problem? So which one of you want to go first? Yuri? Yes, I will go first. Overall, talking about the potential technology development and artificial intelligence development on our enterprise plans and buildings, we have a lot of ways, and there's 3 main areas. First one being the automation of the battle vehicles, which would allow the battle vehicle to autonomously act within the planned operation environment when the equipment and the vehicle can analyze the situation and what needs to be done in order to reach the goal of the mission. Second one being increasing the artificial intelligence involvement in missiles, which would allow the missiles to analyze what are the area of impact and what would be the impact. And the third one being using using virtual reality in order to train and to analyze what are the possible extensions for the actual open systems and what are capabilities. And the third question regarding licenses, that's going to be both using technologies that our partners have, who are ready to develop those with us, and also stimulating internal or homeland development. Alexander, well, if I'm talking about technologies of artificial intelligence in the cybersecurity systems, a lot of areas can be involved there because, for example, cybersecurity, it's a huge thing. It's a huge domain regarding technology and regarding the research. But straight ahead, what I think of is using artificial intelligence technology was analyzing and evaluating risks. When there's a decision made regarding using certain activities or technologies in order to defend their system, we need a complex evaluation. And for that to happen, we need to use big data, we need to operate huge amount of data, and we need to analyze historical data, and also to include in consideration what are the effects that led to on every level, based on every level, starting from a certain object and all the way up to the overall country and government. Second interesting artificial intelligence development area is involving artificial intelligence technologies to constant monitoring system and identification of cyber threats on a wide area. So 24/7, we would observe certain data which would allow us to receive a certain indicator whether is the attack in progress or is the system running up and running and nothing is wrong, or is it on the limit, on the line of being broken into. And those data needs to be evaluated and processed really fast and visualized so that the team can make a decision what their response should be. That is the second area where artificial intelligence, which without it, it's just impossible. And the third area, out of many, that's three out of many that I see and know, is that when we defend a perimeter of different systems, when we have a necessity to rapidly analyze data regarding the weak points, and those are a lot of data, and what are the abilities of those weak points to be used against us, and to control those vulnerabilities or to provide recommendations how they can be fixed. That is securing the perimeter, as we call it. In order to this system, in case it has a lot of separations, in order to secure the perimeter, we need a lot of specialists, and we don't really have them, as you know. So that's where artificial intelligence can replace those specialists and gather that information and also analyze it. Those are three areas that, just from the top of my head, as an example of artificial intelligence involvement. But there are a lot of other areas. I do know that you have a lot to say. No. I only will have a brief statement, a brief answer. And moreover, I would like to say that it's really alike my colleagues' view. First one, and I think that we need to start with simple things and develop on top of that. First one is being real basic, that's automated systems of management or control. Because I want to mention that on 25th, there's been a strategy of the cybersecurity where it has embedded an automatization as the most important thing in the structure of defense. And I would like to emphasize that specialists who state that 40% of automatization will increase our forces' stability and survivability. The only thing is that I would agree with Yuri that the weapon systems, it's not just weapon system, but also the armed forces themselves also need to get automated. So automated management system, because that's really important. And logistical forces as well. Yeah, definitely. Regarding the second area, I think that we should not be shy that we don't have artificial intelligence in our land robots. We need to just compete on it. That will be developed. So that's why I'm supporting the idea to create battle robot units which have different functionality. And I would agree with Mr. Yuri that those land forces robots will save our soldiers and officers' life. And that is a really important thing. And why they should have different functionality? Because throughout, with the governmental coordination, we can create fighter robots or assault robots, but also we can create a counter radio robots or any other specific functionality. That is really important. And one more thing, what are the ways that it can be implemented? I'm believer that recently the National Security Committee made a decision on the rocket or missile program, and I think that we need to create a robotization and automation system for that as well. Because once again, I would like to mention that artificial intelligence in the Soviet Russia was started creating in the 50s of the last century, the same time as the rocket problem has been started. That is a really important thing to note. So that's with the approach that I support, the national governmental program to support automation and robotization. The government should be implementing, and the national security they should be supporting it. So I think we discussed all the questions that we needed. Does anybody have anything to summarize or to add on top of what we said? I think the main thing left now is implementation, bringing it to life. So, dear colleagues, regarding the lyrical speech or statement and task, well, that's a philosophical, so that's technical philosophy, but artificial intelligence I do have it in my hands right now. Face ID, that is artificial intelligence. Beforehand, identification using biometrical data can be done only by a human being. Right now, that can be done by an algorithm, by an app, which is built into our phones. That is part of the artificial intelligence, but it's a complicated algorithm. Beforehand, only person could tell who the person sitting next to it is. That is artificial sight, for example, but that is possible. It's been built in here, but nobody was fired after they've implemented that into your phones. So, okay, really thank you for a really thorough discussion. I thank you to the institutions that they were able to organize this event together with us. And I hope that the conversation we had today will be implemented in real life and will lead to certain activities. So thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.